Hello there and welcome back to my YouTube account. As ever, James here for another ACCA exam tip video. Today we're going to be looking at how to pass your upcoming ACCA Audit and Assurance examination. Now, for those of you who have not visited my channel before, and where have you been? Good grief, you're missing out on so much fun. I'm an ACCA qualified member from the UK, and today I'm going to be going through my top 5 tips how you can pass the audit and assurance paper from my experience. I did and was lucky enough and fortunate enough through some hard work to pass it in my first attempt. I got 54, I think it was mid-50s score. I then went on to actually do the advanced audit and assurance paper as well. So lots of my tips and experience are actually brought into this video. I've also gone through and analysed the external examiner's report and done a video on it on my channel as well. So as I'm getting better at this editing malarkey, well, I'll put it up at the top here so you can click on it as well so that you can go through. I've been through it head to toe on there, loads of really good points. I've incorporated some of them in here, but this is all based on my experience, and I know if you're going to follow this, you've got a really good chance of passing for your upcoming examination. Now, I also get asked quite a lot of the time, what books you'd recommend, James, as well. I'll put in the description below all of the up-to-date books from credible resources. Feel free to check them out and where you can buy them down there as well, so that I don't get all these queries on it. The resources are there for you, the links are below. But coming on to today as well, if you are new to my channel and you've been missing out surely, but feel free to subscribe. The button will be below so you get access to all of my ACCA exam tips and the podcasts as well. It's all designed to really connect ACCA members and students from around the world, plus to help you pass your upcoming examination. Well, I think the introductions are all done. I think let's get cracking on actually going through the examination now and actually coming to those 5 key points as to how you can pass your upcoming ACCA Audit and Assurance exam. Right, come on James, off we go. Now, pen and paper at the ready. This is important. First one, strategy. Number 1, key tip. What is your Audit and Assurance exam time strategy? This is a big deal, okay? In the external examiner's report, not just this year, previous years as well, and when I was a student, it was a case of time management is such a key factor in an ACCA exam and also the audit and assurance exam as well. So first of all, let's bring it back. You get 180 minutes for 100 marks. Yes, I know you get the 15 minutes planning and reading time as well, but in essence, it's 180 minutes for your 3 hours divided by the 100 marks of the exam. So you're going to get 1.8 minutes per mark, plus the reading time as well, where we'll come on to that later on. This examination in 2020 is computer based and you can do it pen and paper as well, but it's split into 2 sections, Section A, Section B, nice and easy. Section A is only 30 marks, it's got 3 10-mark questions on there, so according to that you should only be spending 54 minutes on Section A. Okay, coming on to Section B now, that's the other 70 marks, so you should only be spending 126 minutes on Section B. Okay, sounds okay to me. I mean, these are just sort of figures, but you're going to say, James, what's this strategy that you got from your experience? Well, I've been in that situation, and I don't classify myself as one of these gurus online or anything like that, but this is what I would do if I was in your situation having to sit it in your upcoming examination. You've got to keep it simple. Audit and assurance is a really time-pressured examination. So if you're trying to create a strategy in terms of it to pick up on the maximum amount of marks to get yourself over that 50+ mark, you've got to keep it simple. My philosophy is always keep it simple, keep it easy, and you'll see better results on it as well. So this is what I would do. Section A has 3 questions on there, okay? They're objective test questions. They're relating to just basic sort of case studies and mini scenarios. They're 10-mark questions, okay? I would do, okay, 1 question, 20 minutes. So if you've got 3 questions, that is an hour. I can check that on an actual clock quite easy. And this is the key fundamental point, is that it's easy to say to yourself, I've had an hour, if it starts at 9 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon, depending where you are in the world, 9 till 10, Section A, and when it hits 10 o'clock after the hour, I've got to move on. That's it. but there will be a chance to come back to it. So remember before on the 1.8 minutes to mark, we were only saying 54 minutes. I'm even giving you another 6 minutes, okay? I'll come on to that later on, but we're doing an hour for section A. Section B now, we've got in there, it's split into actual different areas on this. So we've got one 30-mark question on there, and then we've got two 20-mark questions. So these are all sort of more scenario based, I would say, in terms of it. But why is this so key? Well, for the 30-mark question, give yourself 50 minutes. It should be 54 minutes, but just give yourself 50. You can do it to time, it's okay. Now, for the other 20-mark questions, I'm going to give myself 35 minutes each. So think about that in practice. Well, 50 minutes plus 35 plus 35, that gives us 2 hours altogether for section B. A lot easier to track the time and to say to yourself, I've got to move on. James, if I waste any more time on this, I'm not going to give myself sufficient time at the end. This also means that you've kept 15 minutes at the end, and this could be the difference. By giving yourself 15 minutes, which was in that sort of planning and reading time, but we're saving that to the end, this is going to be absolutely fundamental and critical to you, that when you come back to that 15 minutes, you've got to have a critical mindset in terms of it. A clear mind, have a sip of water between going from section to section, and definitely before the last 15 minutes on this as well. What it should be is you're going to be answering and revisiting directly with, and I quite like this in terms of audit and assurance, it's with a requirement mindset. Get that noted down, a requirement mindset. This is absolutely paramount because you're going to be revisiting questions, quickly skimming over the requirement, picking up the keywords and saying, have I applied that in the question? You may also need that 15 minutes to go back to a specific question where you went, oh, I was really struggling on that. I need a bit more content down. Okay, brilliant. Go to the requirement, see what the keywords, what were the buzzwords there, and have I identified the issue, explained it, referred to the actual standards as well. That could be the difference by just getting you over that mark in terms of pushing you from the 40s up to the 50 plus as well. But it all comes down to that requirement mindset, focusing what the external examiner is looking for. It comes up all the time, and you'll see that in my external examiner's analysis on this as well. Well, how is this going to work for you? Well, if you're going to apply that strategy by slightly cutting down your time on section B and trying to get a few more marks in section A, past papers are going to be absolutely critical, and doing these questions to time. That is paramount, even more so on this exam versus others as well. I advocate it on all exams. The more past papers you do, the better off you are. But with this one, it's exam technique driven in terms of it. If I had £1 for every time the external examiner mentions exam technique in the actual review that they had in their external examiner's report, I'd be a very rich man in terms of it. But do it to time, exam technique, understanding the requirements, and we'll come on to other points further on as well. So by keeping the timing simple, it's that technique of saying to yourself, I've got to move on, James. That first hour's gone by, then the 50 minutes, another 2:35s, and it just makes you keep on track so much more easier, and especially under the exam conditions where I know it is a difficult exam. Lots of students feel pressure and anxiety on it, so that would be my approach as to getting the time down and giving yourself that 15 minutes at the end to break it down as well. I have also got on my actual channel a study with me video as well, especially for the 10 markers as you see at the start. So hop over to the other channel playlist. It's on there, 10 marker, 18 minutes. I've got a countdown timer on there, and you can work with me on it as well. We can hold each other accountable. Go check it out. Really cool resource on that. I wish I'd have had it when I was studying as well. But overall, that is my time strategy tip number 1 for the audit and assurance exam. By having that time strategy, you're going to be absolutely spot on and giving yourself the best chance to maximize the minutes that you're given, because trust me, they absolutely fly by. So, that was an important one to start off with. But coming on to another point here now, and tip number 2, pen and paper at the ready, requirement, question and answer breakdown. James, what on earth is this? Well, this is now where it links into part 1, but this is where it comes with practice, but I'm going to walk and talk you through. But let's first of all come to the actual requirement now. You've got to break it down and understand what the external examiner is asking for. A really good technique here is when you're going through the requirement, highlight, or as you'll see in the external examiner's report video, I used to put the little number 1 or number 1, 2 and 3 on top of the key words. This is the actual sort of question analysis and requirement analysis technique that I used to go on, because it really focused my mind on, well, what is it actually asking me for? To potentially identify, explain, recommend, or anything on those lines, or an action to actually implement. The reason why this is so key is because in the requirement it usually asks you for maybe 2 or 3 things to do. And if you miss one of those, you might as well wave goodbye to a massive handful of marks. And this is one of the key reasons why students fail this exam. And it only comes with practice as you go through. But having that technique as you're James, what's going on? As you're reviewing the requirement, tongue twister. Don't laugh. That was a bit mean, but it's okay. You're going through, reviewing the requirement as you're going through. And what we're saying there is link it back to, well, when we're going through the actual question analysis, key strategy here is requirement first, then going through the question, and then we plan our answer out as well. I'm coming on to that now without tripping over my own words. Gosh, remember, James, professional. But let's come on to terminology and verbs. These are the key things you've got to pick up on in the actual requirement. As I've said, identify, explain, describe, recommend, and what level of depth they are actually referring to. So how many marks are in that particular requirement, and how many marks is it asking for in the actual question itself? Well, what I'm referring to there is, usually it will say, please identify 3 particular deficiencies, for example, and then it will relate to 6 marks. So in other words, for each point, each deficiency you actually refer to, that is 2 marks per one. So it came up in the external examiner's report that students only refer to 2. If you only refer to 2, you might as well say goodbye to 2 marks, because that is how many points you are asked for and how many marks the requirement is as well. Absolutely fundamental. We've got to also, and get this down because it's come up various times as well, you've got to answer the question what is being asked for, okay? Not answering a question that you want to answer. So whatever the requirement says, you've got to focus and be specific and apply to it as well. I'm using the terminology that the external examiner uses all the time. Break down the question and scenario as you read it through, and note which requirement it could refer to as well. So a little buzzword on the side there as you're going through, highlight a key area that you want to refer back to. There's a lot of information to actually take on board, so it really helps as you're going through to actually do your analysis as you go through it as well. So you've got to relate it to, ask yourself the question all the time, and this is where your critical audit hat mindset goes into it as to, is this a deficiency? Is this an audit risk? Would this help in terms of internal control? Asking yourself questions as you go through, because the scenarios are there to have things wrong with them. You've got to pick up on it. That is the key thing. But we're going to come on to the answer hack that I like to call it now, and very technical in terms of these sort of things. So this is where it's called the draft answer hack, as I like to say it. Short and sweet, little bullet points as it comes up as well. So I'm going to put up here in the edit as well a little screenshot to actually take this from the actual June and July question 1, but it's from a describe and explain audit at the planning stage as well. And I'm going to put it up here, the actual bullet points as to what I would be referring to. So go through the question itself. It's from Scarlett Co. And it was all about there being a new client in terms of they've taken on. What would that refer to? And this is where you've got 2 potential techniques. If you're new to audit and assurance, take the technique that I'm going to walk you through here, and then we'll go through the second one in a moment. So if you've got a new client and actually you're an auditor, first things first, new client was the buzzword to pick up on in the actual question. You're either going to have a new client or a familiar client. So one you've just met or one you've had for numerous years. there are going to be positives and negatives. But for a new client, next keyword to get in your bullet points is unfamiliar. We don't know where they're from or anything on those lines. So there is now we've got to get onto a potential detection risk. Can you see how I'm trying to develop this now? So you've got to actually then maybe recommend or actually state an action to resolve this. So if you've got a new client where there could be many things going wrong with it, well, a potential experienced colleague as well, we might have to actually allocate more time to this client so that we do more rigorous testing in terms of it. And what's the whole point of this all for? Well, to reduce the risk of material misstatement as well. Nice and easy. This is also where you can actually get down what is called a sort of table format in terms of getting the actions on one side with the recommendations on the other. The actual markers for ACCA really advocate for this as well. What you're aiming for here is a direct response, reducing the time wasted on points where you're writing sentence after sentence and it doesn't actually result in any marks on here. A consistent approach and thought process as to, well, what's going on and how can we resolve it as well. But those little bullet point approaches as you're analysing through the question is a little plan that you can get at the start of your answer. You're not going to get marked for having it down, but they are just trigger points so that you can actually elaborate more on in terms of it as well. You'll get better with this technique in terms of this from answering and going through tip 1, like we said, in terms of past papers. Now, the second way of going about this is I've done there 5 or 6 bullet points in terms of it as to planning my answer. But for someone with a bit more experience, maybe they've gone through about 5 or 6 past papers, you could probably get away with just writing down new client and then labelling down 6 or 7 points that you found that could be risks to the audit. And when you see new client, you think, oh, new client, unfamiliar, detection risk with that. Going to need some more experience, more time spent on the client. What do we want it for? Reducing the risk of material misstatement. It's all about those little triggers to help you out so you're so accurate to the scenario in your answers as well. But that is my tip number 2 in terms of it: requirement, question and answer breakdown. Use the tips, analyze it top to bottom, and make sure you don't trip on your words as well. All part of the master plan. I tell you now, it's all there. It's all there. But we've got to come on to now. I'm tripping over my feet now. But number 3 is absolutely fundamental, especially if you're not from an audit background on this as well, is number 3, understand the audit process. Absolutely critical. Now, this is where students trip up all the time. So students who have sit this exam with varying levels of experience in audit, what you need to get familiar at is actually picturing what is going on in the actual scenario and how a sort of audit flows from top to bottom as well, or from start to finish. So, as ever with the newfound editing skills, is if you go up here, this is a resource on ACCA's website where I'll put it in the description to this video below. You can have access to it where it takes you through nice and easy the actual audit process. So first of all, we're starting right at the start here as to, well, should we actually accept or decline that actual audit engagement? Then we've got to go on to, well, now we've accepted them, we've got to understand the entity as well, their environment, what products they sell, where do they operate. We've then got to assess the actual risk of material misstatement as well for the actual financial accounts. Then we've got to think, well, what controls have they got in place? Are they actually affected? What's expected of us as well? Have we got an agreement in place? Because we're then going to have to go and test their controls as to, are they effective enough? Are they giving us complete answers as well? And what are the queries are we going to have to follow up with? As to, well, what are the actual deficiencies in this business in terms of, this is the figure they've got, this is the figure we've got, is it materially misstated as well? We've also got to look at full or actually reducing substantive procedures, what actual processes we're going to go through, and again, more critical areas that get examined, give or take, on every sitting as well. We've then got the final review, reporting back to management, audit committees as well, auditor's report with the overall opinion on the audit as well. So that is just a nice little overview, top to bottom. If you wanted to jot that down, play the video back, whatever helps. But it's understanding that process top to bottom that is really going to help your knowledge on this. There are key areas in terms of audit framework and regulation on this, so referring to the ISAs in your answers is really going to help. Planning and risk assessment always tend to come up and are really examinable with internal control, audit evidence, review and reporting. Again, have a look at the external examiner's report. These are key areas I've gone into more detail on there. But this also links into the actual audit opinion now as to, well, do we actually have an unmodified or modified audit opinion? Well, if we actually have a modified opinion, you need to work out, is it qualifying, adverse, or a disclaimer of opinion, and know the differences between the two. The key word to get down now is pervasive. So how is the risk spread? Is it in one place or is it in numerous places? What I'll do for you as well up here, I'm going to put an actual box as to a really good way to actually lay this out in terms of auditor's judgment regarding the pervasiveness and the actual nature of the matter. How you determine what is qualifying or a qualified opinion, adverse, or a disclaimer on there as well. That will really help. I did also touch on the actual ISAs, or the International Standards of Auditing, a real asset to have in your armory going into the examination. But the key thing here is, if you're going to remember them, brilliant, okay, but you've got to know what they mean and how you can apply it to a scenario correctly. That is the key thing. So, for example, the ISA in terms of 240 refers to the actual auditor's responsibility to fraud. So if I see anything in terms of a dodgy company or which can impact on material misstatement, I can actually refer points back to that standard. All in all, this is all about, there are going to be various different levels of people in your classes, online, or going to the exam, with some with loads of audit experience and some with little to literally none. It's a case of, either way, you've got to understand the processes, the standards, top to bottom, and then that is really going to help you out. So that is tip number 3, understanding the audit process on there as well. Absolutely fundamental. Don't be overwhelmed in class. If you're sat with people who work in audit, do it Monday to Friday, you're only actually competing against yourself. Just ask yourself, am I better than I was yesterday? How much ACCA studying am I doing? And trust me, it will come there in terms of you were reading through your textbook and you're going, gosh, what's this audit and assurance? I've never done it before. I've never seen it in practice. Give it time. Give it time. It will progress. Trust me on that. But we've got to come on to now tip number 4, and that is audit risk, ethics, internal control, techniques. Absolutely paramount now. Pen and paper at the ready, more things to get down here, okay? These are fundamental areas where students struggle, throw away marks, and one of the main reasons as well, with the other points above, why students fail this exam. So let's kick off with actual audit risk as well. Well, it's an audit exam, there are going to be risks. There are key ways of going about this sort of question. First of all, state the account it is affecting. You can't get away with just saying, oh, balance sheet or anything on those lines. You've got to be specific as to trade receivables or inventory on those lines, and then stating, well, does it lead to a specific overstatement or understatement of that financial statement or that account? Refer to those financial statement assertions as well. These are critical words and phrases that you need to be aware of. So I've done a little edit up here again as to how you can remember it as well. And as you can see here, it nicely says cover ACCA. How about that? Well, let's run it through top to bottom on there. So get a screenshot of it, whatever makes best for you. So we've got completeness, occurrence, valuation, existence, rights and obligations. So that's covering our cover on there. And then for the ACCA, we've got allocation, classification, cut-off, and accuracy. These are the key words as to, well, if we do have an overstatement of the assets, that is, well, what's it relating to? Have we not got the existence of some assets in there? Or, well, have we actually got the wrong valuation in terms of it? Can you see how I'm taking those words, applying it back to the scenario, and what is the impact on the financial statements? That is where, say, for example, it increases the actual accuracy of what we're actually saying from an auditor's perspective. And, well, we're going to lead to more actual robustness in terms of our arguments, in terms of, well, the actual quality of the financial statements in our audit goes up on here. Okay, but let's put that in context as well. I did hint at PPE on there and the balance sheet, but let's take an example of, well, what if the training costs of a company were actually capitalized and they're actually put as property, plant and equipment, okay? So should have been an expense, but we've capitalized them. There was a mistake on the system. Well, first of all, that would firstly mean that in the income statement, the profits are overstated. Would you not agree on that in terms of it? Also, the actual assets in the PPE are overstated as well. So there is an actual adjustment required for the classification and the completeness in this. Can you see how I'm applying those terms? This needs to be recognised under the International Accounting Standard of number 16 for property, plant and equipment. This is where that's the sort of standard that is going to separate your script from someone who's going to pass as well, to get you into that 50 plus. Really, really key. But now we're going to come on to internal control now. So on to the next one here. And these are the techniques in terms of, usually you get these for about 2 marks, but it's the key trigger words and the verbs within a question that you need to be aware of. So what have we got on here? First one, and absolutely paramount, where for point 1 it's half mark, point 2 it's another half mark, and then usually for point 3 it's 1 mark. So firstly, we either have describe, evaluate, recommend. So that is your first half mark, another half mark with a 1 mark. Or we have identify, explain, recommend. Or I've also seen before, identify, explain, and then test the control if they are working effectively. So why is this important? Well, most students do not pass this exam because they tend to only identify and actually describe. So you're really limiting yourself to half a mark out of 2, which is only about 25%. If you actually get on to explaining and you actually do it half decently, well, that is 1 mark out of 2, which is only 50%. So you can see where I'm coming from, and the external examiner really wants you to go into absolute detail for this. And that's the really key thing here. So again, we'll take an example for you to help you out here. So let's have a look in terms of if a department exceeds its capital expenditure limits. Keep it simple again. Purchases orders that are not agreed to the budgets in terms of this. Okay, so capital expenditure is going up, it's gone over budgets, so whatever orders we've put in, they're not agreeing back to the budgets. Okay, so this indicates a lack of control because of potentially increased activity. And well, what can we actually do about this in terms of it? Well, better monthly management to actually reconcile this, variance analysis as to, well, this is what should have happened, this is what actually happened, and this is our difference. So comparing as well with an actual test of control in place that maybe we need to get some authorization from a senior member of staff to actually overlook and oversee the actual process here. Can you see the technique of seeing there's an issue and then coming down to how can we resolve it as well? Identify, explain, recommend with an action. Really, really key. Finally, and we're going to come on to the ethics technique now, usually found in section B on here, but it comes under again simply identify, explain, recommend. Half mark, 1 mark. But with ethics and also internal control, you've got to state a specific action. It's not about objectives, action. What are you going to put into place if you're an actual order in this case, in the case of it here. So it's all about being simple and practical, and actual recommendations should be directed to the scenario and also how it is going to be implemented as well. Another thing to note down here is it's exactly the same technique for corporate governance as well. Have a look at some past papers, you'll see it coming up time and time again. But let's just do an off-the-top example here that what if an auditor actually knows the actual client? So maybe they go and play golf with them, or it's a case of they associate themselves with them. Well, first of all, relate it back to the ethics. There's a risk of integrity there in terms of, well, are they going to look at the actual figures more favourably? What can we actually recommend in terms of this? So you've got someone on the audit team who's quite familiar, so there's a familiarity threat here. Well, potentially what we should advise and recommend is an actual rotation with another senior member of staff to actually increase the actual integrity of the audit. This means you're referring back to those ethical standards, so integrity, objectivity, confidentiality, professional behaviour and due care, and professional competence as well. These are absolutely fundamental areas that you need to know. Knowing them will be an absolute advantage going into the examination. And the fundamental thing here is applying it to the scenario, being direct with it as well. It is the breakdown of the marks, which is really, really key that you see here, so that when you go through past papers, check them off as well, and be critical on yourself, because I found that really helped me in my practice on this, that I was just not going into enough detail, and I was really only picking up on half a mark out of 2. Once you get over that stumbling block and you actually follow the process of identify, explain, recommend, going up the pecking order in terms of it with the time management, that's where you're going to see massive improvements. But overall, that is tip number 4, audit risk, ethics, internal control techniques. Absolutely fundamental with those actual marks and the breakdown on there. Well, coming on to now tip 5, and this is some of the key things on here from the external examiner's report and various other things, but tip number 5 now, we have audit and assurance exam tips and tricks. From my opinion, I would say this is where, and deep breath on this, James, as you go through it, but these are points why in my eyes students fail, along with the other 4 up above from my tutoring experience, and also going through the examinations, doing them myself. We've talked about the time management as well and structuring your exams. That is absolutely paramount, but it links into the past papers, so that when you do them to time, mark them yourselves, and actually get yourself a piece of paper in terms of any other things that you've done wrong in terms of that question. Just jot it down, bullet point it down, and so you keep that to one side as to where did I go wrong on that piece of paper. Really good revision tool in terms of it. So you got to, this all comes from doing as many past papers as possible. There is never enough audit and assurance past papers for you to do. It's a case of just keep at it, keep going through it, hold yourself accountable, and keep working through them as well. Now, these are fundamental wordings from the external examiner. Apply your knowledge. You've got to apply your knowledge to the given scenario and be specific. Questions you should be asking yourself doing revision and going into the exams when you're answering an audit and assurance past paper or examination is a case of, am I being specific, James? Am I relating this back to the scenario? Am I demonstrating my audit and assurance knowledge? Am I being too general? Am I just writing textbook answers? You need to tailor your answers, not just dumping information down, because it has to be relevant. There are no marks for general answers. Students fall into the trap of just writing paragraph after paragraph, and they come out of the exam thinking, yeah, I've done quite well on that, I wrote loads down. But the thing is, you wrote loads down but didn't refer to the requirements. That was why it was in tip 1 first of all, as to identifying those key words, those key verbs, so that you hit the nail on the head as to what do I need to refer to here so I can be absolutely concise. It has to be relevant rather than just general answers. So think about it here. The examiners have given you, and this is the mindset I had after I did a handful of past papers, the examiners have given you these scenarios because there are things wrong with it in there, okay? You've got to identify it out, go through it sentence by sentence. There is a reason why things are wrong, such as when we had a new client. What does that mean if you're in that scenario? You've got to be clear and concise, and like I said, with where did it go wrong piece of paper, okay? Keep it simple for yourself in terms of just write it down, bullet point it out as to what didn't I quite get on that bit. Was it a particular standard? Was it a case of maybe my wording wasn't correctly? Were there any key words or trigger questions to go through? Which I'm going to come on to now, because there are just some words that I would highly recommend for you to use. And there is one word I recommend that you do not use, okay? So we'll start with that one word. What do you think the one word is? Oh, I'll give it 3, 2, 1. Did you say check? Do not, and just avoid at all costs, the word check. replace it with these key audit words such as, well, can we consider if there is a self-interest threat, self-review threat, familiarity, we've got intimidation's another one, detection, risks of error, omissions, inherent risk, detection risk as well, verify, confirm, any other things in terms of if we've got risks associated, can we confirm it, can we verify it, is a robust argument, not just check, okay? That is absolutely paramount because it's all about applying your knowledge to the scenario. It's really hard to question spot in terms of an audit and assurance exam because, well, yes, audit risk and internal controls and substantive procedures are actually more than likely to come up. Refer to the actual cover ACCA that we actually had in terms of the assertions as well, but it's all about the real world situations as, do I actually agree with that in terms of what is going on? Can I see any efficiencies, or are there any discrepancies here, or what does it relate to in terms of the actual type of business? I've got to think logically from my business mind as to maybe, are goods in transit, or why is the inventory overstated? I've got to confirm, and again, more audit terms here, confirm, verify, agree balances, for example, to the statement. Do I have third-party evidence? Is it robust? This is the level that the external examiner expects from you as an audit and assurance student sitting this exam. And hopefully you can hear from my voice and sort of passion in this as to, it's a case of that is the sort of level that you've got to be striving for as well. In terms of calculations, just note down you're not given any actual marks for writing down the formulas or anything on those lines. The main calculations that you've just got to show your workings and the figure. They are more interested that you can interpret them in terms of the ratios and materiality as well. Keep all your workings crystal clear and so that you're comfortable in the analysis of it. That is the main thing here. Clearly showing all your workings for the actual marker here. That is paramount. Plus, if it's nicely laid out, you should be able to follow it nice and easy as well. There are student support resources as well online in terms of various other videos, and there is the ACCA student community. So check out online, you can actually get in touch with other students. Really helpful resource that I wish I had in terms of when I was a student. So it's like having an online study buddy. The next key thing, get it down, pen and paper, put it in your reading for next week, is there are ACCA audit and assurance articles online, and the key one mentioned in the external examiner's report in 2020 was the auditor's report article. So it's on there. I put the actual link to this in the description to this video, as I said, so check it out. They mention it twice in the external examiner's report, so the ball is really in your court on that one. But the question you've got to ask yourself is, if I read that report article, am I going to be at an advantage or a disadvantage going into my audit and assurance examination? Well, I think you know the answer to that question. But you've got to answer the questions and put yourself in the perspective of the auditor. So having an auditor's hat on, or just being really questioning in terms of having a skeptical view on most things, and just asking yourself fundamentally, at the end of the day, this is one of the paramount reasons why people fail this exam. Am I really answering the question and requirement here? Am I really answering it in terms of, am I referring to the buzzwords? Am I actually referring to all the key elements on there? And what you'll find is you'll start to actually develop your actual examination technique, going through it, writing in a different audit sort of language, because you're going into sort of auditor mode. You needed to sort of, yes, even though you may not have been an auditor, James had to become an auditor to actually do this examination. And I would highly encourage you to do that, because it puts you in a different mindset, thinking about the processes, how the business operates, where it affects the financial statements, the risks, how we explain it, and then also what can we actually recommend as actions as well. Make sure you keep going through it. The more question practice, the better. Whew. And that is tip number 5, my audit and assurance exam tips and tricks that I'd highly recommend you go away, check them out, hold yourself accountable, and get it done. That is the key thing. Whew. And relax. Well, that wasn't so bad, was it? I'm really hoping you got loads out of that as well. Plus, if you go and check out the actual external auditor's report video, like I said, you're going to get tons of information out of there as well, where even if you maybe have failed this exam before, you will know how to correct that going forward as well. If you found today's video helpful in terms of the 5 key tips, make sure you give the video a massive thumbs up and feel free to leave any comments or queries, whatever it may be, in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed it today. I mean, best of luck with your upcoming ACCA Audit and Assurance examination. Feel free to keep in touch. Let me know how you get on. It's absolutely brilliant to hear from so many of you around the world. But as always, on that bombshell, I'll see you next time. Cheers!